The Vampire King's daughters had not spoken a word in 3 years, and yet here they were, tugging at the skirt of a woman who had been in his castle for less than an hour, their small lips forming a word he thought he would never hear again. "Mama." Gideon Wolfhart stood in the shadow of the marble archway, his pale fingers tightening around the stem of the crystal glass he held. The blood inside had gone cold, but he barely noticed. His silver-white hair fell across his forehead as he remained perfectly still, every instinct screaming at him to intervene, to pull his children away from this stranger, this human who had no right to elicit such a response from them. Yet he did nothing. He watched as the young woman knelt down, her honey-brown hair cascading over her shoulders, her expression shifting from surprise to something softer, something that made his dead heart ache in a way he had forgotten was possible. "Oh, sweethearts," the woman said, her voice gentle as morning mist. "That's a very special word. Are you sure you want to use it for me?" The twins, Isolde and Serafina, merely stared up at her with their wide crimson eyes, their little hands still clutching the fabric of her modest gray dress. They were 5 years old now, vampire children who had lost their mother to a hunter's stake when they were barely 2. They had been silent ever since, communicating only through gestures, and the occasional telepathic whisper that only Gideon could hear. But this was different. This was their voices, small and fragile and directed at someone else entirely. Gideon set his glass down on the nearby table with more force than necessary, the sound echoing through the grand entrance hall. The woman looked up, her hazel eyes meeting his across the distance, and he saw no fear there, only a quiet steadiness that irritated him more than terror would have. He stepped forward, his long black coat sweeping behind him, every inch the ancient ruler he was. "Miss Jordan," he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, "I trust you understand the gravity of what just occurred." Jade Jordan rose to her feet, though she kept her hands where the girls could reach them. She was 24, according to the file his castellan had provided, with a degree in early childhood education and a spotless record working with traumatized children. She had no family to speak of, which was one of the reasons she had been selected. Humans who came to work in his household needed to be isolated, easily contained, and above all, discreet. The last nanny had lasted 3 months before the isolation drove her to attempt an escape. She was now living comfortably in a cottage on the far edge of his territory with her memories carefully altered. "I understand that your daughters spoke for the first time in years," Jade said calmly. "And I understand that this is both precious and probably frightening for you, Your Majesty." Gideon's jaw tightened. She had no right to be so composed, no right to stand there in his castle as though she belonged. "They called you something you are not. You will correct this misunderstanding immediately. With respect, Your Majesty, I cannot control what they choose to call me. I can only do my best to care for them, which is why you hired me." Jade looked down at the twins who had pressed themselves against her legs as though seeking protection. From him, from their own father, the realization cut deeper than any silver blade. Gideon forced himself to remain calm, to project the authority that had kept his kind safe for the past 800 years. He was the vampire king of the Western Territories, ruler of thousands, keeper of the ancient laws. He had survived wars, betrayals, and the death of his beloved wife, Elisabetta. He would not be undone by a human woman and 2 small voices. "We will discuss this further in my study," he said coldly. "Now." He turned and walked away, expecting obedience. Behind him he heard Jade murmur something to the girls, her voice too soft for even his enhanced hearing to catch, and then the rustle of skirts as she followed. The twins remained in the entrance hall, and he could feel their confusion and hurt radiating toward him like a physical force. His study was located in the eastern tower, accessible through a series of corridors that twisted and turned in ways meant to confuse intruders. Jade kept pace with him without complaint, her breathing only slightly elevated by the time they reached the heavy oak door. Inside, the room was lined with books that dated back to the founding of the vampire courts, shelves that reached up to a ceiling painted with scenes of ancient battles. A fire burned in the massive fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the Persian rugs and leather furniture. Gideon moved to stand behind his desk, using the physical barrier to maintain distance. Jade stood before him, her hands clasped in front of her, waiting. "You were hired to care for my daughter's physical and educational needs," he began, his tone sharp. "You were not hired to replace their mother." "I have no intention of replacing anyone, Your Majesty," Jade replied. "But I also won't reject 2 little girls who are clearly starving for affection and maternal comfort." "They have affection. They have me, do they?" The question was gentle but pointed, and Gideon felt his fangs extend slightly in response to the challenge. "You overstep your bounds, Miss Jordan." "Perhaps," she admitted. "But someone needs to." Those girls haven't spoken in 3 years. The fact that they felt safe enough to speak to me, a stranger, within an hour of my arrival suggests that something has been missing from their lives. With all due respect to your grief and your responsibilities as king, your majesty, they need more than what you've been giving them. Gideon moved with the inhuman speed of his kind, crossing the space between them in less than a heartbeat. He loomed over her, using his considerable height and presence to intimidate, to remind her exactly what he was. You know nothing of what I have given them, nothing of what I have sacrificed to keep them safe in a world that would see them dead simply for existing. To her credit, Jade did not flinch. She tilted her head back to meet his gaze, and he saw something fierce in her eyes, something that matched the protective fury rising in his chest. Then tell me, she said quietly. Help me understand so I can help them. The sincerity in her voice caught him off guard. He stepped back, suddenly aware of how close he had been, close enough to smell the floral scent of her shampoo and the warm sweetness of her blood beneath her skin. He turned away, moving to the window that overlooked the gardens below. The sun had set an hour ago, leaving the world bathed in the silvery light of the full moon. Their mother was killed by hunters, he said finally, his voice devoid of emotion. Vampires who procreate are rare. Elisabetta and I were bonded for nearly a century before she conceived. The girls were our miracle. When she was destroyed, they witnessed it. They have not been the same since. He heard Jade's sharp intake of breath, felt the wave of sympathy that rolled off her. I'm so sorry. I cannot imagine that kind of loss for any of you. The hunters were dealt with, Gideon continued, but the threat remains. There are factions within the human world who believe all vampires should be eradicated, regardless of the treaties we have established. There are also factions within my own kind who see the girls as abominations, half-bloods who should never have been born. I have spent the last 3 years consolidating power, eliminating threats, building walls high enough and strong enough to keep them safe. That is what I have given them, Miss Jordan. Safety, security, life. But not love, Jade said softly. Not the kind they can feel and hold on to. Gideon's hands clenched on the windowsill. I love them more than my own existence, I believe you. But do they know it? When was the last time you held them, played with them, told them stories, or sang them to sleep? I am a king. I do not have the luxury of being simply a father. Then perhaps you need to make that luxury, Jade said, and there was steel in her voice now. Because those little girls need their father more than they need a king. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken things. Gideon wanted to rage at her, to throw her out of his castle and find someone more compliant, someone who would not challenge him at every turn. But he also recognized the truth in her words, recognized the guilt that had been eating at him for 3 long years. What would you have me do, he asked, hating the vulnerability in his own voice. Jade moved to stand beside him at the window, keeping a respectful distance. Start small. Have dinner with them. Not a formal meal where they sit and watch you conduct business, but a real dinner where you talk to them, ask them about their day, read them bedtime stories. Let them see you as more than just a distant figure who occasionally appears to issue orders. And you? Gideon asked, turning to look at her. What is your role in all of this? I'll do what I was hired to do, Jade said simply. I'll teach them, care for them, and give them the stability and affection they need. But I won't try to be their mother, Your Majesty. I'll be their nanny, their friend, their advocate. The rest is up to you. Gideon studied her face, searching for deception or hidden agendas. But all he saw was honest determination and a fierce protectiveness that reminded him painfully of Elisabetta. His wife had been a warrior, a vampire of ancient bloodline who had fought beside him in countless battles. She had also been gentle with their daughters, patient and loving in ways he had never learned to be. Very well, he said at last. We will try it your way. But know this, Miss Jordan, if you betray my trust, if you endanger my daughters in any way, there is nowhere in this world you can hide from me. I would expect nothing less, Jade replied. And for what it's worth, Your Majesty, I think you're a better father than you give yourself credit for. You just need to remember how to show it. She left the study then, closing the door quietly behind her. Gideon remained at the window, staring out at the moonlit gardens, wondering what he had just agreed to, wondering why the sight of this human woman walking away left him feeling strangely bereft. The following days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Jade proved to be everything her references had promised and more. She woke with the girls at dusk, helped them dress in their little velvet gowns, and spent the evening hours teaching them mathematics, literature, and art. She played games with them in the conservatory, read them stories in the library, and sang them lullabies that echoed through the castle halls in her clear, sweet voice. And the girls responded. They did not speak again, but they smiled more, laughed silently. and clung to Jade with an affection that both warmed and wounded Gideon's heart. He found himself watching from doorways and shadows, observing the easy way she interacted with his daughters, the natural maternal instinct that guided her every move. He also found himself noticing other things: the graceful curve of her neck when she bent to help Serafina with her letters, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed, the fierce intelligence that shone through when she debated philosophy with his Castellan over dinner. Jade Jordan was beautiful, yes, but more than that, she was vibrant in a way that made his ancient castle feel alive again. It terrified him. On the 5th night of her employment, Gideon kept his promise and joined his daughters for dinner. The meal was set up in the smaller dining room, the one Elisabetta had favored for family gatherings. Jade had arranged it carefully. A table set for 4, with child-sized chairs for the twins and proper place settings that made the occasion feel special. Isolde and Serafina looked up in surprise when he entered, their red eyes wide. They wore matching dresses of deep blue, their white hair braided with silver ribbons. They were beautiful, these daughters of his, perfect blends of their mother's elegance and his own strength. "Good evening," Gideon said, suddenly uncertain. How did one talk to 5-year-old children? He ruled kingdoms, negotiated treaties, commanded armies, but this felt infinitely more complex. Jade, sensing his discomfort, smiled encouragingly. "Your father has joined us for dinner, isn't that wonderful? Why don't you show him what you've been working on today?" Isolde, always the braver of the two, hopped down from her chair and scurried to the corner where a small easel stood. She brought back a painting, her little hands smudged with watercolors. The image was abstract, swirls of purple and silver that might have been stars or flowers or simply the imaginings of a child's mind. "This is beautiful," Gideon said, and he meant it. He knelt down to her level, studying the painting with genuine interest. "Tell me about it." Isolde's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked frustrated, her small hands gesturing helplessly. Gideon felt his heart clench, but before he could speak, Jade intervened. "It's all right, sweetheart, you can show him instead. Art doesn't always need words." Isolde nodded and pointed to different parts of the painting, her finger tracing the shapes. Gideon watched, trying to understand, and slowly the story emerged. The purple was the night sky, the silver was moonlight, and the darker swirls were them, his family, together. "We are together," he said softly, and Isolde nodded eagerly. He reached out hesitantly and pulled her into an embrace, feeling her small body relax against him. "We will always be together." When he looked up, he found Jade watching them with tears in her eyes. She quickly wiped them away and busied herself with serving dinner. But the moment had been seen. She cared. This human woman who had known his daughters for less than a week genuinely cared about their happiness. The dinner was awkward at first but gradually became easier. Jade drew him into conversation, asking questions about vampire history that his daughters might find interesting. He found himself telling stories of the old courts, of battles fought under blood moons and alliances forged in shadow. The twins listened with rapt attention, and Serafina even reached across the table to touch his hand at one point, a gesture so simple and trusting that it nearly undid him. After dinner, Jade suggested he help put the girls to bed. Their bedroom was a spacious suite decorated in shades of cream and rose, with a large canopy bed they shared and shelves full of toys and books. Jade supervised as he fumbled through the bedtime routine, patient with his inexperience. "Now a story," she prompted gently. Gideon sat on the edge of the bed, his daughters tucked under the covers on either side of him. He chose a book from the shelf, an old fairy tale about a princess and a dragon, and began to read. His voice, usually so commanding, softened as he spoke, and he found himself adding inflections and character voices that made the girls giggle. When the story ended, he bent to kiss each of them on the forehead, breathing in their scent of lavender and innocence. "Good night, my darlings," he whispered. Isolde's hand caught his sleeve as he started to rise. She looked at him with those serious red eyes and mouthed the word, "Stay." Gideon glanced at Jade, who nodded encouragingly. So he stayed, sitting beside the bed until both girls drifted off to sleep. Jade waited in the doorway, and together they left the room quietly, closing the door behind them. "You did well," she said as they walked down the corridor. "I felt foolish," Gideon admitted. "I have negotiated with kings and fought in wars, yet reading a children's story reduced me to stammering." "That's because it mattered," Jade said. "The other things you can approach with strategy and distance. But being a father requires vulnerability, and that's much harder for someone like you." "Someone like me," he repeated with a hint of bitterness. "You mean a monster." Jade stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression fierce. "You are not a monster, Your Majesty. You're a father who loves his children and has been drowning in grief and fear. There's nothing monstrous about that." They stood in the dimly lit corridor, shadows dancing across the stone walls from the torches burning in their sconces. Gideon found himself trapped in her gaze, in the certainty he saw there. She truly believed what she was saying. She saw him not as the vampire king, not as a creature of darkness and blood, but as simply a man trying his best. "Why did you take this position?" he asked suddenly. "The file said you had offers from prestigious families, positions that would have paid better and been far less isolating." Jade looked away, a hint of sadness crossing her features. "Because I know what it's like to grow up feeling unwanted. I aged out of the foster system at 18 with no family, no one who cared whether I lived or died. I became a nanny because I wanted to give other children what I never had. Someone who would fight for them, protect them, love them unconditionally. When I heard about 2 little girls who had lost their mother and stopped speaking, I knew I had to try to help them." The revelation shifted something in Gideon's perception of her. She was not just doing a job, she was fulfilling a mission born of her own pain. They were not so different, he and this human woman. Both of them were scarred by loss, both of them trying to protect what remained. "I am glad you came," he said quietly. "The girls are happier than I have seen them in years. They just needed permission to be happy again." Jade said, "And so do you, Your Majesty." Before he could respond, she bid him good night and disappeared down the corridor toward her own chambers. Gideon remained standing alone, her words echoing in his mind. Permission to be happy. As though happiness were something one could simply choose to embrace after years of grief and darkness. Yet as the days turned into weeks, he found himself seeking out that happiness despite himself. He began joining the girls for dinner every night, reading to them before bed, and even participating in their games during his rare free hours. Jade was always there, a steady presence that somehow made everything easier. She knew when to step in and when to fade into the background, giving him space to build bonds with his daughters while remaining available when he floundered. She also challenged him in ways no one else dared. When he made decisions about the girls' education or schedule without consulting them, she called him out. When he reverted to cold formality after a difficult day of court politics, she reminded him that his daughters needed warmth, not authority. And when he tried to maintain emotional distance, she refused to let him retreat behind his walls. "You cannot protect yourself from pain by refusing to feel," she told him. One evening, after he had cut short a conversation about Elisabetta, "The girls need to see you grieve, to know that it's all right to miss their mother. Pretending she never existed only makes it worse." They were in the library, the girls already asleep. Jade had stayed behind to reorganize some books, and Gideon had found himself drawn there, unable to stay away. It was becoming a problem, this gravitational pull he felt toward her. "Speaking of Elisabetta is disloyal," he said, his voice rough. "I am beginning to forget what she looked like, the sound of her voice. And there are moments now when I realize I have not thought of her all day. That terrifies me, Miss Jordan. If I let go of my grief, what do I have left of her?" Jade set down the book she was holding and moved closer, her expression infinitely gentle. "You have your daughters. You have the love you shared and the life you built together. Grief is not a monument to the dead, Your Majesty. It's a burden that the living must learn to set down so they can keep moving forward." "I do not know how to move forward," Gideon admitted. "I do not know how to be anything other than what I am. A king, a vampire, a widower." "Then learn," Jade said simply. "Start by allowing yourself to feel things again. Joy, hope, connection." The way she said the last word, the way her eyes held his, made Gideon's breath catch. There was something happening between them, something he had been trying desperately to ignore. But in that moment, with moonlight streaming through the library windows and the scent of old books surrounding them, he could no longer deny it. He was falling for his children's nanny. This human woman who challenged him and comforted him and made him want to be better than he was. "Jade," he said, using her first name for the first time, "you should not be here." "In the library?" she asked, confused. "With me, near me. I am dangerous in ways you cannot fully comprehend. Because you're a vampire, because I am beginning to care for you," he said bluntly. "And caring for anyone in my world is an invitation for them to be hurt." The confession hung in the air between them. Jade's eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise, and Gideon cursed himself for his weakness. He should have remained silent, should have maintained the professional distance that protected them both. "I should go," he said, turning toward the door. "Wait." Her hand caught his arm, warm against the cool silk of his sleeve. "You don't get to say something like that and then run away." Gideon looked down at where she touched him, marveling at her courage. "You should be running from me, not trying to keep me here." "I'm not afraid of you," Jade said. "I know what you are, what you're capable of. But I also know who you are. I've seen the way you love your daughters, the way you're trying so hard to be what they need. That's the man I see, Your Majesty, not the monster you think you are. I have killed Jade. I have drained life from humans like you, have torn apart those who threatened my kind. My hands are stained with centuries of blood, and yet you hold your daughters with such gentleness, she said softly. You are more than your worst moments, Gideon, we all are. Hearing his name on her lips was his undoing. He reached up to cup her face, his pale hand stark against her warm skin. She did not pull away. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes drifting closed for just a moment. This cannot be, he whispered. Even if I wanted it, even if you did, the danger would be too great. My enemies would see you as a weakness to exploit, and my own kind would never accept a human as anything more than food or servants. Then we won't tell them, Jade said with a hint of defiance. Not yet, not until we figure out what this is between us. You would be content with secrecy? With hiding in shadows? I've lived in shadows my whole life, Your Majesty. What matters is who you're in the shadows with. Gideon wanted to argue, wanted to push her away for her own protection. But the hope in her eyes, the possibility she offered, was too seductive to resist. He had been alone for so long, drowning in responsibility and grief. And here was someone offering him a lifeline, asking only that he be brave enough to take it. If we do this, he said carefully, there will be rules. You will carry a protection charm at all times. You will not leave the castle grounds without my knowledge, and if at any point the danger becomes too great, you will leave, no questions asked. Agreed, Jade said, though he saw the stubborn set to her jaw that suggested she had no intention of honoring the last rule if it came to that. You are infuriating, he told her, but there was warmth in his voice. You're not the first person to say so, she replied with a small smile. They stood there in the library, neither quite willing to move to break the spell of the moment. Finally, Gideon stepped back, putting necessary distance between them. We should be careful, he said. The girls cannot know. Not yet, they have been through enough upheaval. Of course, Jade agreed. This stays between us for now. But keeping secrets in a castle full of vampires with enhanced senses proved more difficult than either of them anticipated. Gideon's castellan, a vampire named Lucian who had served him for 3 centuries, noticed the change within days. You are distracted, Lucian observed as they reviewed reports from the outer territories. Your mind is elsewhere. I am perfectly focused, Gideon said, not looking up from the documents. You have read the same page 4 times, my king. Gideon set down the paper with more force than necessary. What do you want me to say, Lucian? I want you to be careful. Lucian's expression was grave. I know you have developed feelings for the human. The entire court will know soon if they do not already. You must consider the implications. I am aware of the implications, Gideon said coldly. Are you? The Council of Elders already questions your judgment regarding the girls. If they believe you are compromised by a human, they will move against you. And the laws regarding relationships between vampires and humans are clear. They are forbidden. Laws can be changed. Not easily. Not without support from the other kings. And you know how they feel about mixing our bloodlines with humans. Lucian paused, then added more gently, I do not say this to wound you, my king. I say it because I care for you and for those children. Elisabetta was my friend as well as my queen. I would not see her daughters endangered because you cannot control your heart. The mention of Elisabetta was a low blow, and Lucian knew it. Gideon felt anger rise hot and swift, his fangs extending fully. You forget yourself, Castellan. I speak truth, Lucian replied, not backing down. If you care for this human as much as I suspect, you will think very carefully about whether pursuing this relationship is worth the cost. After Lucian left, Gideon remained in his study, staring at nothing. Everything his Castellan had said was true. The vampire world was built on tradition and hierarchy, and relationships between vampires and humans were forbidden by ancient law. There had been exceptions in the past. Humans turned into vampires for love, but the process was agonizing and not always successful. And even if Jade agreed to be turned, even if she survived, there was no guarantee the council would accept her. He should end this before it truly began. He should send Jade away, find someone else to care for his daughters, and bury whatever feelings had taken root in his chest. But that night, when he went to say goodnight to the girls, he found Jade singing to them. Her voice was clear and sweet, a lullaby in a language he did not recognize. Isolde and Serafina were entranced, their little faces peaceful in a way he had not seen since their mother died. Jade looked up as he entered, her song trailing off. I was just finishing up, she said softly. No, please continue. I did not mean to interrupt. She hesitated, then resumed singing. Gideon sat in the chair by the window and listened, watching his daughters drift toward sleep in the arms of a woman who was not their mother but who loved them nonetheless. and he knew with a certainty that terrified him that he could not let her go. Not yet, perhaps not ever. After the girls were asleep, he followed Jade out into the corridor. "I need to speak with you." She heard the seriousness in his tone and nodded. They walked in silence to a small sitting room rarely used by anyone, a private space where they would not be disturbed. Gideon closed the door and turned to face her. "My Castellan knows about us," he said without preamble. "Or suspects, at least. He has warned me about the consequences of pursuing a relationship with a human." Jade's expression remained calm, though he saw worry flicker in her eyes. "What consequences?" "Political upheaval. Potential challenges to my authority. Danger to you, to the girls, to everything I have built." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "The laws of our kind forbid relationships with humans, Jade. They see your kind as lesser, as food or servants at best." "And what do you see when you look at me?" she asked quietly. Gideon moved closer, unable to help himself. "I see someone brave and fierce and impossibly kind. I see someone who brought light back into my daughters' lives, who made me remember what it means to feel. I see someone I have no right to want but cannot seem to resist." Jade reached up to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his pale skin. "Then we'll figure it out. Together there has to be a way." "There is one way," Gideon said reluctantly. "I could turn you, make you one of us. But the process is excruciating and there is no guarantee of survival. And even if you lived, you would lose your humanity, your ability to walk in sunlight, to age, to have children of your own." "I would be asking you to give up everything." "Not everything," Jade said. "I would gain eternity with you. With the girls, that's not nothing, Gideon. You say that now, but you do not understand what you would be giving up. The hunger for blood, the isolation from your own kind, the weight of immortality. I would not wish this existence on anyone, least of all someone I care for." "Then let me make my own choice," Jade said with quiet intensity. "I'm not a child, Gideon. I understand the risks, but I also understand that what we have, what we're building, is worth fighting for." Before he could respond, a commotion erupted elsewhere in the castle. Shouts echoed through the stone corridors, followed by the unmistakable crash of breaking glass. Gideon's entire body went rigid, every instinct snapping to attention. "Stay here," he commanded, already moving toward the door. "Like hell," Jade said, following him. They ran through the corridors, Gideon's supernatural speed forcing him to slow so Jade could keep pace. The disturbance was coming from the eastern wing near the girl's bedroom. Gideon's heart, dormant for so many years, suddenly felt like it would burst from his chest with terror. He burst into his daughter's room to find Lucian locked in combat with two intruders dressed in black tactical gear. Hunters. They had somehow breached his castle defenses, had made it all the way to his children's room. The girls were huddled in the corner, screaming silently, their little faces white with terror. Gideon moved with the full force of his ancient power, tearing one hunter away from Lucian and slamming him against the wall with enough force to crack stone. The man crumpled, unconscious or dead. The second hunter spun toward him, raising a crossbow loaded with a silver-tipped bolt. "Down!" Jade's voice rang out behind him. Gideon dropped just as the bolt flew over his head, but Jade had not stayed in the doorway as he had assumed. She had run forward, placing herself between the hunter and the girls. The bolt meant for Gideon's heart hit her shoulder instead, and she went down with a cry of pain. Time seemed to slow. Gideon saw Jade fall, saw the blood blooming on her dress, saw his daughters watching in horror as history repeated itself. Another woman they loved, struck down by hunters. He felt something inside him break, some last vestige of control or mercy. The hunter did not have time to reload his crossbow. Gideon was on him in an instant, fangs buried in his throat, draining him dry with savage efficiency. The man's struggles weakened, then stopped entirely. Gideon let the body fall and turned to Lucian. "Secure the castle. Find out how they got in. Execute anyone who was complicit in this breach, at once, my king." Lucian hesitated only a moment, glancing at Jade. "She needs medical attention." "I know." Gideon moved to where Jade lay, carefully lifting her into his arms. The silver bolt had gone clean through her shoulder, missing anything vital but causing tremendous damage. She was pale, her breathing shallow, but her eyes were clear when they met his. "The girls," she whispered. "Are they safe?" "They are safe because of you," Gideon said roughly. "You foolish, brave woman. You could have been killed." "Better me than you," she said, and then her eyes rolled back as she lost consciousness. Gideon carried her to his own chambers, the most secure room in the castle. He laid her on his bed and began carefully removing the bolt, knowing it would cause her agony if she were awake. He cleaned and dressed the wound with supplies kept for human servants, his hands steady despite the rage and fear coursing through him. Isolde and Serafina appeared in the doorway, Lucian hovering behind them. The girls looked at Jade lying so still and pale on the bed, and something in their faces told Gideon they were reliving their mother's death. "She will be all right," he told them, not knowing if it was true but needing to give them hope. "She is strong, your Jade, stronger than any of us knew." Isolde moved closer, her small hand reaching out to touch Jade's arm, and then for the second time she spoke. "Please don't leave us, Mama," she whispered. Her voice cracked from years of disuse. Serafina echoed her sister. "Please, Mama, we love you." The words broke something open in Gideon's chest, some dam that had been holding back 3 years of grief and fear and love. His daughters had spoken, had claimed this human woman as their mother, and he could not find it in himself to correct them, because they were right. Jade had become their mother in all the ways that mattered. "She will not leave," he promised, though he had no authority to make such a vow. "I will not allow it." He sent the girls back to their room with Lucien, who would stand guard over them for the rest of the night. Then he settled into the chair beside his bed, keeping watch over Jade as her body fought to heal. Humans were so fragile, their lives hanging by threads that could be cut at any moment. How did they bear it, knowing they could be snuffed out so easily? Near dawn, Jade's eyes fluttered open. She looked around, disoriented, then focused on Gideon sitting beside her. "You stayed," she murmured. "Where else would I be?" he asked roughly. "You took a bolt meant for me, Jade. You nearly died protecting me." "Protecting the girls," she corrected weakly. "They need you. They can't lose another parent, and what about you? Do you not consider what losing you would do to them, to me?" Jade tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in her shoulder. Gideon helped her, propping pillows behind her back. "I didn't really think about it," she admitted. "I just saw the hunter aiming at you, and I moved. Instinct, foolish instinct." But his hand was gentle as it brushed hair back from her face. The girls spoke again. "They called you Mama and begged you not to leave them." Tears filled Jade's eyes. Oh, those sweet girls. "They love you," Gideon said, "as do I." The confession hung in the air between them. Jade's breath caught, her hazel eyes searching his face. "Say that again." "I love you, Jade Jordan," Gideon said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability of the admission. "I have tried to resist it, tried to maintain distance, but I cannot. You have brought life back to my castle, light back to my children, and hope back to my own dead heart. I love you, and I am terrified of what that means." "I love you too," Jade whispered. "I think I have since that first day, when I saw how much you were hurting, how hard you were trying to be everything for everyone. You don't have to be perfect, Gideon. You just have to be here, present, with us." Gideon leaned forward and kissed her, gentle and reverent, careful of her injury. She tasted like courage and stubbornness and something indefinably sweet. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. "I do not know how we will make this work," he admitted. "The council will oppose us. The other vampire kings will see you as a weakness, and there will always be hunters seeking to destroy what we have. Then we'll deal with each problem as it comes," Jade said firmly. "Together." "I'm not going anywhere, Gideon. You're stuck with me. I can think of worse fates," he said with the ghost of a smile. Over the following weeks, as Jade recovered from her injury, Gideon began laying the groundwork for what he knew would be a political battle. He called a meeting of the Council of Elders, the ancient vampires who advised him on matters of law and tradition. They gathered in the throne room, 12 vampires ranging in age from 500 to over 1,000 years old, their pale faces impassive as they listened to his announcement. "I intend to take a mate," Gideon declared, his voice carrying through the vast chamber. "A human named Jade Jordan who currently serves as nanny to my daughters." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, as expected, the protests began. "This is forbidden by ancient law," said Corvinus, the eldest of the council. "Our kind does not mate with humans. Our kind does not acknowledge the importance of human life," Gideon countered. "But I propose we change that. The world is evolving, and we must evolve with it. The hunters grow bolder because they see us as monsters. Perhaps it is time we proved them wrong." "By diluting our bloodlines?" another elder demanded. "By elevating cattle to our level?" Gideon's eyes flashed dangerously. "Speak of her that way again, and council member or not, you will answer to me. Jade Jordan is no one's cattle. She is brave, intelligent, and she has proven herself willing to die to protect this family. She has earned respect at the very least. Even if we were to overlook the law," Corvinus said carefully, "she is human. She will age and die while you remain unchanged. How is that sustainable?" "I will offer her the choice to be turned," Gideon said. "If she accepts, she will become one of us, fully and completely. If she refuses, then we will have whatever time we are given, and I will cherish each moment of it." The council members exchanged glances, communicating in that silent way ancient vampires had. Finally, Corvinus spoke again. "The law requires a vote of all 4 vampire kings to overturn a fundamental rule. You know this, Gideon. Even if we support you, which we do not, you must convince Alaric of the north, Thaddeus of the east, and Constantine of the south to stand with you. And you know they will not. Then I will change their minds, Gideon said with absolute certainty. I am asking for your patience and your discretion while I do so. Do not force my hand, Council. I would prefer to handle this through proper channels, but I will not give her up. Not for you, not for the other kings, not for anyone. It was as close to a threat as he could make without actually declaring war on his own council. The elders understood. They agreed to give him time to make his case to the other kings, but the disapproval was palpable. After the meeting, Lucian found him in his study. That went about as well as expected, the Castellan observed dryly. I knew they would resist, Gideon said, staring at the portrait of Elisabetta that hung above the fireplace. But I had hoped for more understanding. You are asking them to overturn centuries of tradition for a human they do not know, Lucian pointed out. From their perspective, you are compromised by emotions, making poor decisions that could endanger all of vampire society. And from your perspective, Lucian was quiet for a moment. From my perspective, I have not seen you this alive in 3 years. She is good for you, for the girls, but I fear what it will cost to keep her. The other kings will not be easily swayed, Gideon. Alaric especially has made his views on humans quite clear. Then I will have to be persuasive, Gideon said grimly. He began making arrangements to visit each of the other vampire kings in turn. It would take time during which Jade would remain in his castle, hopefully safe from further hunter attacks. Gideon tripled the guard and installed new security measures, using both ancient vampire magic and modern technology to ensure no one could breach his defenses again. Jade, for her part, threw herself back into caring for the girls as soon as she was able. Her shoulder healed slowly, leaving a scar she claimed not to mind. It's proof I protected what matters, she told Gideon when he expressed guilt over her injury. The girls continued to speak, though only in short sentences and only when they felt completely safe. They called Jade Mama consistently now, and while it sometimes hurt to hear another woman given that title, Gideon understood that Elisabetta would have approved. His wife had loved fiercely and without jealousy. She would have wanted her daughters to know maternal love, no matter who provided it. One evening, about a month after the hunter attack, Gideon found Jade in the conservatory with the girls. They were planting flowers, dirt smudged on their faces and dresses filthy. It was so normal, so human, that Gideon felt his heart constrict. We are making a garden for Mama Elisabetta, Isolde announced when she saw him, so she knows we remember her. Gideon knelt beside his daughter, emotion thick in his throat. That is a beautiful idea, little one. Your mother would be honored. Do you think she would like Mama Jade? Serafina asked with the blunt directness of children. The question caught Gideon off guard. He looked at Jade, who had gone very still, waiting for his answer. Yes, he said finally. I think your mother would like Mama Jade very much. She would be grateful that someone so kind and brave is taking care of you. And you? Isolde pressed. Do you love Mama Jade like you loved Mama Elisabetta? How did one explain to children that love could be infinite, that caring for someone new did not diminish what came before? Gideon chose his words carefully. I love Mama Jade in a different way than I loved your mother, but no less deeply. Love is not a finite resource, my darlings. There is always room for more. The girls seemed satisfied with this answer. They went back to their planting, chattering to each other in their still hesitant voices. Jade moved to stand beside Gideon, her hand finding his. Thank you, she whispered. For that, I meant every word, he replied. Though I suppose I should have asked you properly before announcing to my daughters that I love you. Jade laughed softly. I think the situation called for honesty over formality. That night, after the girls were in bed, Gideon took Jade to the castle ramparts. They stood overlooking his territory, miles of forest and mountains bathed in moonlight. The air was cool and clean, scented with pine and approaching autumn. I have to leave soon, Gideon said without preamble, to visit the other vampire kings and plead my case for us. It will take weeks, perhaps months. Jade's hand tightened on his. I understand, but I don't like it, neither do I. But it is necessary. I need their support to change the laws, to make what we have legitimate in the eyes of our kind. And if they refuse? Jade asked. If they will not change the laws, what then? Gideon turned to face her, his pale eyes intense in the moonlight. Then I will have a choice to make. My crown or my heart, my duty or my love. That's not a choice I want you to have to make, Jade said. Your people need you. The girls need their father to be king. And I need you, Gideon said simply. All of you. I will not go back to the half-life I was living before you came here, Jade. I cannot. Then we'll find a third option, Jade said with determination. There's always a third option if you look hard enough. You are an optimist, Gideon observed. Someone has to be, she replied with a small smile. You vampires are all so dramatic and doom-focused. Someone needs to balance that out. Despite the gravity of the situation, Gideon found himself laughing. It felt strange, this lightness in his chest, this ability to find humor even in dark moments. Jade had given him that, this gift of seeing beyond the immediate crisis to the possibility beyond. He kissed her there on the ramparts, with the moon and stars as witnesses. And for the first time in 3 years, Gideon allowed himself to hope that the future might hold something other than duty and loneliness. His first visit was to Alaric the Ruthless, vampire king of the Northern Territories. Alaric's castle was carved into a glacier, all ice and cold beauty. The Northern King was exactly as his reputation suggested, brutal, efficient, and utterly without mercy for those he deemed weak. So you have come begging for permission to mate with a human, Alaric said as they sat in his hall, surrounded by ice sculptures and the bones of his enemies. I confess myself surprised, Gideon. I thought you had more pride. Pride is a luxury I cannot afford when it comes to my children's happiness, Gideon replied evenly. They have bonded with this woman. She has brought them back from the edge of darkness. Then keep her as a servant, Alaric said dismissively. Use her as you would any human, but do not ask me to legitimize what should remain in shadows. She is not something to be used, Gideon said, his voice hardening. She is my mate in all but law. Then turn her, Alaric suggested. Make her one of us properly. Though I warn you, the Council of Elders here in the north has a success rate of barely 50% for human transformations. Your human might not survive, and then where will you be? That is her choice to make, not mine to force, Gideon said. But transformation does not address the larger issue. Our laws regarding humans are antiquated, Alaric. The world has changed. If we do not change with it, we will become extinct. Alaric laughed, a sound like cracking ice. Extinct? We are the apex predators, Gideon. We have survived for millennia, and we are hunted more aggressively now than ever before, Gideon countered. The hunters have technology, organization, and public sympathy on their side. They paint us as monsters because we behave as monsters. Perhaps if we showed them we are capable of love, of family, of all the things they value, they might see us differently, or they might see us as weak, Alaric said, soft, easy to destroy. There is nothing weak about loving someone, Gideon said quietly. It takes more strength to open yourself to that vulnerability than it does to remain isolated and alone. Alaric studied him for a long moment. You speak from experience, I take it. You loved your Elisabetta this way. I did, and when she was taken from me, it nearly destroyed me. But I am still here, I survived, and I am willing to love again, knowing full well I might lose again. That is not weakness, Alaric. That is courage. The Northern King was silent, considering. Finally, he spoke. I will not support your petition to the council, but neither will I actively oppose it. You may have your human, Gideon, for all the good it will do you, but do not expect the rest of us to follow your example. It was not the endorsement Gideon had hoped for, but it was better than outright opposition. He left the Northern Territories and traveled east to meet with Thaddeus the Wise, a vampire scholar known for his progressive views. Thaddeus received him in a library that rivaled Gideon's own, surrounded by books and artifacts collected over 1,000 years of life. The Eastern King was more sympathetic to Gideon's position, having himself formed attachments to humans over the centuries. I understand your dilemma, Thaddeus said as they discussed the matter over goblets of warmed blood. The heart wants what it wants, regardless of law or tradition, but you must understand the fear that drives our kind's reluctance to change these laws. Fear of what? Gideon asked. Fear of vulnerability, Thaddeus explained. For centuries we have maintained our power through distance and mystique. We are feared because we are unknown, other. If we begin forming genuine bonds with humans, we lose that distance. We become known, understood, and therefore less frightening, less powerful, but more connected, Gideon argued, more integrated into the world rather than separate from it. Is that not worth something? Perhaps, Thaddeus allowed. I will support your petition, Gideon. You have my vote. But I warn you, Constantine will not be so easily swayed. The Southern King is traditional in all things, and he views humans as little more than prey. Then I will have to change his mind, Gideon said, though his heart sank. He knew Constantine's reputation. The Southern King was ancient, nearly 1,500 years old, and utterly set in his ways. The journey to the Southern Territories took another week. Constantine's castle was built into the ruins of an ancient city, all crumbling stone and faded grandeur. The Southern King himself was a figure from legend, tall and gaunt, with hair so white it seemed to glow and eyes that burned like coals. You waste my time with this foolishness, Constantine said without preamble. I will not support your petition to legitimize a human mate. The very idea is an abomination. The same was once said of vampire children. Gideon pointed out. Yet here we are centuries later with many of our kind choosing to procreate. Times change, Constantine. We must change with them. I do not change, Constantine said flatly. I endure, I maintain. I preserve what our kind has built over millennia. You would tear that down for a human, you will blink and lose. Her life is a moment compared to yours, Gideon. Why sacrifice everything for something so fleeting? Because some moments are worth more than lifetimes, Gideon said. And because she is willing to be turned, to become one of us. If she survives the transformation, your objections become void. If she survives, Constantine repeated mockingly. The odds are not in her favor. Most humans do not survive the transformation, and those who do are often mad from the pain of it. You would put this woman through that agony on the slim chance she emerges vampire? That is her choice to make, Gideon said. I will not force her, but I will support her if she chooses it. Constantine leaned back in his throne, studying Gideon with those burning eyes. You are a fool, Gideon Wolfhart. A fool blinded by emotion and sentiment, but you are also a father who loves his children, and I can respect that if nothing else. I will not support your petition. But I will offer you an alternative. What alternative? Gideon asked warily. The binder to you through blood magic, Constantine said. Not a turning, but a binding. She will gain extended life, enough to match a significant portion of yours. She will be able to tolerate sunlight in ways we cannot, but she will also be tied to you irrevocably. Your life will be hers, your death will be hers. It is an ancient magic, rarely used, but it might serve your purposes. Gideon had heard of such bindings, though he had never witnessed one. It was old magic from the earliest days of their kind, when vampires sometimes bound themselves to human wizards or warriors for mutual benefit. The process was permanent and dangerous in its own right. What is the cost? Gideon asked, because there was always a cost. Pain, as all transformations require, and vulnerability. If she dies, you die with her. If you die, she follows immediately. You will be two halves of one whole, unable to exist without the other. For someone in your position, that is a significant weakness. But she would not have to go through a full transformation, Gideon said slowly. She would retain most of her humanity. Yes, she would need blood only occasionally, not constantly. She would age, but slowly. And she could bear children if that matters to you. Constantine waved a dismissive hand. It is the best compromise I can offer. Take it or leave it, but do not expect my vote for full legitimacy. Gideon left the southern territories with much to consider. He had one vote in favor, one neutral, and one offering an alternative. It was not the clear victory he had hoped for, but it was something. He could present the binding option to Jade and let her decide. The journey home took 2 weeks, and every moment away from his daughters and Jade felt like an eternity. When he finally rode through the gates of his castle, it was near dawn. He went immediately to check on the girls, finding them asleep in their bed, peaceful and safe. Then he went to Jade's chambers. She was awake, sitting by the window with a book in her lap. When she saw him, she set the book aside and ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. You're back, she breathed. I was so worried. I am here, he said, holding her tightly. I am home. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other. Then Gideon pulled back and told her everything that had transpired with the other kings. He explained the binding ritual, the risks and benefits, and made it clear the choice was entirely hers. Jade listened carefully, asking questions when she needed clarification. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time, thinking. If I do this binding, she said finally, I get to stay with you, with the girls. I get a lifetime or something close to it. Yes, Gideon confirmed. But you will be tied to me in ways that make you vulnerable. My enemies become your enemies. My death becomes your death. Sounds like marriage, Jade said with a hint of humor. Then more seriously, I want this, Gideon. I want you, the girls, all of it. I've never had a family before. I'm not going to walk away from one now just because the road ahead is complicated. The binding is painful, Gideon warned, and permanent. There is no undoing it once complete, I understand. When do we do it? Are you certain? Gideon searched her face, looking for any hint of doubt. You can take more time to consider. I don't need more time, Jade said firmly. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Let's do this. Preparations for the binding ritual took 3 days. Gideon consulted with Lucian, who was one of the few vampires old enough to remember how such rituals were performed. They would need rare ingredients, specific lunar timing, and absolute privacy. The ritual itself would take place in the deepest part of the castle, in a chamber that had not been used in centuries. On the night of the binding, Gideon took Jade to the ritual chamber. It was carved from solid rock, circular and covered in ancient symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness. At the center was a stone altar, and around it, Lucian had arranged candles in a specific pattern. You can still change your mind, Gideon said as they stood at the threshold. Jade shook her head. I'm ready. The ritual required both of them to shed blood to speak ancient vows, and to join their life forces through magic older than any vampire alive. Gideon cut his palm first, then Jade's, and they clasped hands over the altar. He spoke the words in a language that predated modern civilization, and Jade repeated them phonetically, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. The magic, when it came, was like lightning through his veins. Gideon felt Jade's life force rushing toward him, felt his own flowing into her, and the pain was extraordinary. Jade cried out, her body arching, but she did not let go of his hand. He held on to her, anchoring her through the agony, willing her to survive. The ritual seemed to last hours, though Lucian later said it was barely 10 minutes. When it finally ended, they collapsed together on the stone floor, gasping for breath. Gideon pulled Jade into his arms, checking her over frantically. Are you all right, Jade? Speak to me. I'm okay, she said weakly. That was intense. Gideon helped her sit up, examining her. Already he could see subtle changes. Her skin had taken on a slight pallor, though nothing like a full vampire. Her eyes, when she opened them, had flecks of red mixed with the hazel, and when she looked at him he felt the binding between them like a physical cord, connecting their hearts and souls. I can feel you, Jade whispered in wonder. Your emotions, your presence, it's like you're part of me now. Because I am, Gideon said, his voice rough with emotion. As you are part of me, we are bound, Jade. Forever. She smiled, radiant despite her exhaustion. Forever sounds perfect. They remained in the ritual chamber for a while, too weak to move immediately. Lucian brought them blood and wine, and they drank slowly, letting their strength return. When they finally emerged, dawn was breaking. Jade flinched at the first rays of sunlight streaming through the windows, but did not burn as a full vampire would. It tingles, she said, fascinated, like mild sunburn but not painful. You will be more sensitive to sunlight than before, Gideon explained. But it will not kill you as it would me. It is one of the advantages of the binding versus full transformation. Over the following days, Jade adjusted to her new state. She discovered she could move faster than before, though not with vampiric speed. Her senses were sharper, able to hear and see things she had missed as a full human. And she needed blood, though only small amounts every few days. Gideon provided for her from his own stores, and she learned to accept this new part of herself. The girls were fascinated by the change in their beloved Mama Jade. They could sense the magic in her now, the connection between her and their father, and they seemed to relax even further, secure in the knowledge that Jade was now permanently part of their family. Word of the binding spread through the vampire territories quickly. The reaction was mixed. Some saw it as a reasonable compromise, a way for Gideon to have his human mate without fully breaking the laws. Others viewed it as a loophole that set a dangerous precedent, but no one could deny that it was legal, falling within the boundaries of ancient magic that predated the current laws. The Council of Elders was less pleased. They summoned Gideon to explain himself, and he went willingly, bringing Jade with him. She stood beside him in the throne room, her hand in his, as he faced down 12 of the oldest and most powerful vampires in his territory. You have bound yourself to a human, Corvinus said, his ancient face expressionless. This was not the solution we discussed. It is a solution that serves everyone's needs, Gideon replied. Jade is no longer fully human, which addresses your concerns about her mortality and fragility. But she is also not fully vampire, which means I have not broken the law against turning humans without council approval. You have found a loophole, another elder accused. I have found a compromise, Gideon corrected, and I have secured the happiness and stability of my children, which should be everyone's primary concern. The council deliberated, but in the end, they could not overturn the binding. It had been performed correctly, using magic that was older and more fundamental than their laws. They had to accept it, even if grudgingly. After the council meeting, Gideon took Jade to meet his daughters properly as his mate, not just their nanny. He organized a small ceremony in the castle chapel, a space that had been consecrated for vampire marriages centuries before. It was not a legal human marriage, but it carried weight in vampire society. Isolde and Serafina served as witnesses, dressed in beautiful gowns of violet and silver. They stood beside the altar, solemn and proud as their father and Mama Jade exchanged vows. Gideon spoke first, his voice carrying through the chapel. I, Gideon Wolfhart, take you, Jade Jordan, as my mate and my equal. I pledge to protect you, to cherish you, and to love you for all the days we are given. You have brought light back into my life and love back into my heart. You have given my daughters the mother they deserved. I am honored to call you mine. Jade's eyes were bright with tears as she responded. I, Jade Jordan, take you, Gideon Wolfhart, as my mate and my equal. I pledge to stand beside you, to support you, and to love you through every challenge we face. You and your daughters have given me the family I always dreamed of. I am honored to be yours." Lucian, acting as officiant, declared them bound not just by magic but by love and choice. And when Gideon kissed Jade, sealing their union, the girls clapped and cheered, their voices ringing clear and joyful through the chapel. That night they celebrated as a family. A private dinner in the smaller dining room, with dishes Jade could now eat without issue and blood wine for those who needed it. The girls chattered excitedly about their new mama, about the binding they didn't fully understand but recognized as important. "Will you have babies now?" Serafina asked with the blunt curiosity of children. Jade blushed, but Gideon answered calmly, "Perhaps someday. Would you like siblings?" Both girls nodded enthusiastically. "Brothers or sisters, we do not mind," Isolde said seriously. "But they must be nice and share toys." "We will keep that in mind," Gideon said, amused. Later, after the girls were asleep, Gideon and Jade walked through the castle gardens. The moon was full and bright, casting silver light over the carefully tended flowers and pathways. They walked hand in hand, comfortable in the silence between them. "Thank you," Jade said eventually. "For what?" Gideon asked. "For fighting for us. For finding a way to make this work. I know it wasn't easy dealing with the other kings and the council." "You are worth fighting for," Gideon said simply. "All of you, you and the girls. You are my family now, Jade. I would move mountains for my family." "Lucky for you, we don't require mountains to be moved," Jade teased. "Just your presence and your love." "Those I can provide," Gideon promised. They stopped at a fountain, sitting on the marble edge and listening to the water. Jade leaned her head on Gideon's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "Do you think Elisabetta would approve?" Jade asked softly. "Of us, of this?" Gideon was quiet for a moment, considering. He could feel his late wife's presence in these gardens, in every corner of the castle they had built together. But there was no anger in that presence, no jealousy or resentment, only love and the hope that he would find happiness again. "Yes," he said finally, "she would approve." Elisabetta loved fiercely, but she was not possessive. "She would want me to be happy, to give the girls a complete family, and she would like you, Jade. You are strong and kind and brave, all the things she valued." "I wish I could have known her," Jade said. "She would have liked that too," Gideon said. "But she is gone and we are here. We honor her memory by living fully, by loving completely. That is what she would want for all of us." The months that followed were the happiest Gideon could remember in years. The castle, once cold and silent, was filled with life and laughter. The girls thrived under Jade's care and Gideon's renewed attention. They spoke more each day, their voices growing stronger and more confident. They learned and played and grew. Two little half-vampire children who were loved beyond measure. Jade settled into her role as mate to the vampire king with grace and determination. She learned vampire politics, became conversant in the various factions and power structures, and proved herself a valuable advisor to Gideon. She also maintained her focus on the girls, ensuring they received the education and affection they needed. And she and Gideon grew closer with each passing day. The binding between them deepened, becoming not just a magical connection but an emotional one. They could sense each other's moods, anticipate each other's needs, and communicate with looks and touches as much as words. 6 months after the binding, Jade discovered she was pregnant. The news sent shockwaves through the castle and the broader vampire community. Pregnancies resulting from bindings were rare but not unheard of, and they often produced children with unique abilities. Neither fully vampire nor fully human, Gideon was terrified and ecstatic in equal measure. He hovered over Jade constantly, driving her to distraction with his protectiveness. But she tolerated his worry with good humor, understanding that he was afraid of losing her the way he had lost Elisabetta. The girls were thrilled at the prospect of a sibling. They spent hours planning what games they would play with the baby, what stories they would tell, whether it would be a brother or sister. Their excitement was infectious, and soon the entire castle was preparing for the new arrival. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Jade experienced some of the usual discomforts. She craved blood more frequently, which Gideon provided without question. Her connection to him through the binding seemed to strengthen, and there were times when they could communicate telepathically, sharing thoughts and emotions without speaking. When the time came for the birth, Gideon refused to leave her side. He held her hand through the labor, murmuring encouragement and promises, willing her to be strong. And when their son finally entered the world, wailing loudly and waving tiny fists, Gideon felt his heart expand in ways he had not thought possible. They named him Gabriel, a strong name that honored both vampire and human traditions. He had Jade's hazel eyes and Gideon's pale hair, and when he looked up at his parents, There was intelligence and awareness beyond his moments of life. Isolde and Serafina were allowed to meet their brother shortly after his birth. They approached cautiously, clearly awed by the tiny creature in Jade's arms. When Jade asked if they wanted to hold him, they nodded eagerly, and she carefully transferred Gabriel to Isolde's arms, supporting both children. "He is so small," Isolde whispered, gazing down at her brother. "You were this small once," Gideon told her, "and you will help teach him how to be strong and brave as he grows." "We will protect him," Serafina declared, "like Mama Jade protected us." "Yes," Gideon agreed. "We will all protect each other. That is what families do." As the weeks passed and Gabriel grew, the castle settled into a new routine. Gideon balanced his duties as king with his responsibilities as father and mate, learning to prioritize in ways he had not before. He delegated more to Lucian and other trusted advisors, freeing up time to spend with his family. Jade proved to be a natural mother, caring for Gabriel with the same fierce love she showed the girls, and the binding between her and Gideon continued to deepen until they could barely remember what it felt like to be separate individuals. One evening, as they sat together watching the children play in the conservatory, Gideon reflected on how much had changed in just over a year. He had gone from a cold, distant king drowning in grief to a man with a full, loving family, and it was all because of the brave woman sitting beside him. "What are you thinking about?" Jade asked, sensing his contemplative mood through their bond. "How grateful I am," Gideon said simply. "For you, for this family, for the second chance I have been given." "We were all given second chances," Jade said, taking his hand. "The girls got their voices back. I got the family I always wanted. And you got to remember how to live again, not just exist." "You have a gift for perspective," Gideon observed. "Someone has to," Jade teased. "You vampires are so dramatic about everything." They laughed together, comfortable and content. In the conservatory, the girls were teaching Gabriel how to water plants. Though at only a few months old, his contribution was mostly splashing in the water tray. But he was happy, and his laughter joined his sister's voices in a symphony of joy. The hunter threat never fully went away, and there were still political challenges from vampire factions who disagreed with Gideon's choices. But with Jade beside him and his children safe, Gideon faced each challenge with renewed strength. He had something worth fighting for now, something beyond duty and tradition. Years passed, and the family grew stronger. Isolde and Serafina matured into intelligent, compassionate young women who balanced their vampire nature with the humanity their mothers had instilled in them. Gabriel grew into a curious, energetic boy with abilities that manifested uniquely, neither fully vampire nor human but something beautifully in between. And Gideon and Jade remained bound, their love deepening with each passing year. They added 2 more children to their family, twin girls named Helena and Aurora, who had Jade's warm skin and Gideon's silver eyes. The castle that had once been silent and cold became a home filled with laughter, love, and life. On the evening of their 10th anniversary of being bound, Gideon took Jade back to the ramparts where he had once confessed his love to her. They stood overlooking the territory, watching the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and purple. "Do you have any regrets?" Gideon asked, pulling her close. "Not a single one," Jade said immediately. "This life, this family, it's everything I ever wanted and more than I dared dream of, even with the danger, the politics, the isolation from the human world. Even with all of that," Jade confirmed. "Because I have you, I have our children, I have purpose and love and belonging. What more could anyone want?" Gideon kissed her then, pouring a decade of love and gratitude into the gesture. When they finally pulled apart, the stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. "I love you, Jade Jordan Wolfhart," he said. "For all eternity." "I love you too, Gideon," she replied. "For all eternity and beyond." They stood together on the ramparts as night fell completely, 2 souls bound by magic and love, watching over the family and territory they had built together. And in that moment, Gideon knew with absolute certainty that every challenge, every struggle, every moment of doubt had been worth it. His twin girls had whispered "Mama" to the new nanny, and he had pretended not to hear. But in truth, he had heard everything, felt everything, and it had changed the course of all their lives. That single word, spoken in hope and longing, had opened his heart again and led him to a love he thought he would never find. And now, surrounded by family and filled with hope for the future, Gideon Wolfhart, the vampire king of the Western Territories, understood that sometimes the greatest strength came not from standing alone, but from allowing others in. From being vulnerable enough to love and be loved in return, the castle stood strong beneath the stars, its halls filled with the sounds of children laughing and growing. And in the master chambers later that night, Gideon held Jade as they drifted toward sleep, their hearts beating in synchronicity, their lives forever intertwined. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. For everything. Thank you for letting me in, Jade murmured back, already half asleep. For trusting me with your heart and your daughters. Our daughters, Gideon corrected gently. They are as much yours as mine now. Jade smiled against his chest. Our daughters, she agreed, our family, and in the quiet darkness of their chambers, with the bond between them glowing warm and strong, they rested together, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they would face them together. Forever bound, forever loved, forever family, the end.